into the panel discussion, and it's one I am really excited about because today we will be talking about large language models or language models generally, exploring the evolving landscape of language models. And on that point, I know every once in a while here at Convo Collective, we do like to do these more kind of technically focused events like this one. And so I'd like to level set for a moment and just kind of briefly introduce everyone and make sure that we're all on the same page when what we mean when we're talking about language models. So if you've seen any of our kind of intro to natural language understanding webinars that we do every once in a while, there are kind of two camps now when we're talking about language models. The more traditional language models that you're likely more familiar with if you've been working in the space for a while would be the ones that will allow you to do those traditional aspects of natural language understanding. And that's going to be intent recognition, so recognizing what it is that the user is asking to do, what their intent is, and entity extraction. And that is recognizing actual valuable data and what the user has said and being able to extract that so we can do something useful with it. So if we're helping them find some tickets, that might be origin city, destination city, what class you'd like, etc. So that kind of traditional natural language understanding we use more in kind of what you might consider state machine or traditional chatbots and voice interfaces. The kind of newer breed of these would be what are called large language models. You might have heard of these if you've heard of OpenAI with its GPT-3. A large language model has been trained on a very, very large set of text. In the case of GPT-3, it's a snapshot of all the text on the internet. And then the way these models work is they are continuations usually. So you can give it a piece of text and its job is to try to guess what the most likely way to continue that text would be. And so the output of that means that can actually reason and perform these kind of novel feats. We're learning more and more about what they can actually do every day. So not only can I ask it to summarize Huckleberry Finn, but I can ask it to do so in the form of like a Shakespearean sonnet if I want to, and it will attempt to do that. So those are the two kind of language models that we're usually discussing when we're talking about language models. And so now I would like to turn it over to our panelists and give them a chance to introduce themselves before we get started. And we will start with Asma Mohammed.
Hey everyone, I'm really excited to be here. My name is Asma Mohammed. I'm a senior director at Wisdom AI, where we specialize in conversational AI. We're a startup based in Toronto, and we have kind of a three-pronged approach. The business that we're in, we provide conversational AI solutions to help businesses achieve their targets and goals. But we also use specialized analytics. We have a product offering that can get into optimization and ongoing analysis of your intents, of your data, falling back on the huge libraries of AI that we have. And then also we can help brands around the world build their conversational AI teams, whether that's a conversational designer, implementation engineer, solution architect, whatever you need. So that's a little about Wisdom, and I'll hand it off to Benoit next.
Yeah, I found the unmute button. Thank you, Ashma. So Benoit Alvarez here, CEO for Qbox, and we really are testing solutions for conversational AI project. So from really deep levels NLU testing, so really understanding the value of the training data and the learning value of each piece of training data, so word by word analysis, utterance analysis, and so on to level up what we call end-to-end testing, which is more like dialogue flow testings or user journey testings. So we have solutions that automate all that as it's become more and more time consuming. I pass it to Andy.
All right. Hey, I'm Andy. I am a philosophy major dropout, first of all. And I am a founder at Lexi.ai. So Lexi.ai is a conversational intelligence that answers legal questions instantly and connects people to lawyers. I actually got interested in natural language number of years ago and started an agency that didn't go anywhere, didn't get any customers, but I got very interested in the problem of creating amazing conversational experiences. And so in October 2019, or not 2019, in October of last year, when GPT-3 became public, I took my experience in the legal domain and as head of product at a startup, and combined that with GPT-3 to create our product. So we're an early stage startup, pre-revenue, and yeah, just about 4 months in, but excited about the future, excited to be here with these great panelists, and looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. And again, for folks that are just joining, I am Matt Buck. I'm the CTO of Voxels. Been involved in the conversational AI space for, I guess, about 7 years now. All right, great. So we will be getting it started with some of the questions that folks submitted before the event got started. And if you have any questions as we're going along, please be sure to drop those into the chat and we will try to get to those. So first off, for our panelists here, we have a question. How should companies think about the business case for building their own language models? So for example, fine tuning from open source models, or using their own conversational data versus outsourcing to third parties like OpenAI or Cohere. And we'll be turning this one over to Andy to get us started.
Sure. So first thing I'm going to say is about large language models in general. So they're very, very expensive and resource intensive to build on your own. I'm not sure if the question here is actually referencing creating their own large language model from scratch. But just to be clear, that's something that probably took on the order of $20 to $40 million in compute costs alone for OpenAI. Microsoft actually built them a supercomputer to build their large language model on. And a lot of the other large language models that are in the market now are based on work with supercomputers elsewhere. So creating your own large language model, not feasible for most. Now, what about then using an open source model versus like a third party like OpenAI or Cohere? I'll just give you a little direction based on my experience. Open source models, I should say I strongly believe in the value proposition of open source, and I do think that it's good that some of these bigger names have some competition from the open source arena. But in my experience, unfortunately, open source models just do not reach the level of quality that you're going to want in order to be able to provide a stellar user experience. So, that's changing. One of the biggest developments on this recently was the Bloom model, which actually just came out and is a collaboration of computer scientists and others across the world. And it's probably the best open source model available today. But even their model is not available to just run on your own. So you probably are going to end up working with, if you're going to use a large language model, you're probably going to end up working with some of the other vendors. OpenAI, Cohere, AI21 has also a great model. There are others, but in my experience, OpenAI and AI21 are some of the best. So.
And maybe if I can add to Andy, I think it really depends of your use case, because we have seen so many people trying to build their own NLP just to do classifications. And it's just like, why would you do that? Yes, 3, 4, 5 years ago, yeah, why not? Now it's just not worth the cost. You're not going to reach the performance. And if you reach the performance that commercial model have, are you going to be able to maintain the development war out there? Because they are keep improving those models. So really depends of the use case, and if you don't do classification, if you want to do something a little bit different, you can now have easy access to things like Andy mentioned, OpenAI and so on, open massive amount of opportunity. Microsoft Turing models as well, quite strong. Interestingly enough, those two GTP3 and Turing's, very, very similar in terms of the approach. Obviously, the architecture inside is very different. And we have a use case that where we use large model in our company to generate training data for customer. And we use both of them. We use both of them because they bring us different results. But we use both of them, we let them generate it, knowing that that generation is going to be okay, but not all of it will be great. If you say, generate me five pieces of training data, the 5 of them won't be great, but 2, 3 of them are going to be very, very excellent. So you need to think about topping that up with your own technology. What are you going to do on top of that in order to make the use case you want to make, really, really fit and giving your user of your tools or whatever you are building the experience you want to achieve.
Asma, I think you may be on mute.
Yep, the classic Zoom mistake, right? Kind of where the industry is going, these companies are investing millions and millions of dollars and getting the right postdocs to invest their time and research into developing these language models. They lay a very good foundation that companies need to tailor to whatever their use case is, because these open source companies will build a good language model, GPT-3, for example, and then leveraging that for what you need to do specifically is kind of where the market is going now and has been going now for the last 1 to 2 years at least.
Excellent. Yeah, and those are some great points there. And yeah, I think just like we were saying up top, the kind of first decision to make is what are we building? What are we trying to do? That's going to guide the decision to, what type of model are we going to use? Is it the more traditional model? Is it a large language model? Or do we just need, simple classification? Let's move to our second question here. So what will the content expert's role be as content generation becomes increasingly more automated?
I can take that question.
Great.
It's kind of interesting because I think AI scares a lot of people sometimes because they think their jobs will be automated, but it's actually creating a lot of new jobs instead of automate. And for whatever it's automating, it's creating like a plethora of new jobs. So for people who might be content experts, when you're looking at language generation, you can plug in all your content into some type of language generation model, I can spit it out. Those people who might have come up with that content now are still going to be involved. There's still going to be a need to have a human in the loop to make sure that it's whatever's being spit out is on brand, has the right information in place, to make sure that companies are not kind of stating the wrong facts to their customers conversationally. The nature of their job is going to change. They won't be writing copies anymore, but they'll be kind of supervising what is going out a bit more and changing their role into a much more, I would say, nuanced and complex role in a way where they can supervise these models and what's going on, fine tune them if they need to, or a request to fine tune them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think we've hit on this a couple times, is that, when we're dealing with what's sometimes called synthetic data generation, right? So asking usually a large language model actually to say, okay, well, when I'm training a natural language understanding model to do intent recognition, for example, I need to give it lots of different examples of how a user might request that particular thing. I can ask large language models to do that for me. And this is something that we do in Voxels as well, saying what could a user possibly say at this point in the conversation. Large language models are great at this, but it's still something that does require, that the human to review what's actually being generated when we're dealing with synthetic data generation. I absolutely agree. It's more, we see it more a case of using AI to augment human intelligence to allow us to achieve more, faster, rather than looking at this is how can we eliminate as much headcount with software as possible. Yeah, so great points there. Benoit or Andy, wanted to give you all a chance to jump in if you'd like on that one.
Sure. I just published a blog post this morning on kind of the changing role of conversational designers given the new landscape with large language models. In that post, I describe a difference between what I'm calling a first order approach to conversational design and a second order approach to conversational design. So imagine you have a company bot that spits out company policy, and you've written, let's say 100 or so responses based on intents that describe a company policy or describe company policy. And you have that bot up and running. And then somebody in the company comes to you and says, you know what, I want to change the tone here. I actually want a sassy company bot that makes entertaining responses. Okay, well, what do you have to do? So on a first order approach, you would go and you would rewrite all 100 of those responses, right? On a second order approach, the change looks much different. So on a second order approach, you'd simply write something at the top of a prompt that says, hey, when you're giving responses based on this knowledge base, I'd like you to behave like a sassy robot that gives entertaining answers. And assuming you've done your prompt design well and the large language model is properly configured, the large language model on its own will do the work to rewrite those answers. And so that's a second order approach. You can see that on that approach, it's easier in a sense, but it also requires a little bit more work on the back end to make sure that the responses that are coming out are properly attuned to the tone you're looking for. So the design becomes more of a structure on top of your existing structures, as opposed to this kind of rote level.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Matt, but I think that's what we see right now. I mean, we are seeing a lot of people playing around with large models, but never let it loose. Never let it loose. Always, human output controlled right now. I mean, we are dealing with, 30 or 40 of the biggest, brand that have the biggest chatbot in the world. And you can see that, everything that has to do with tone of voice or has to do with company representation. So how is a company going to present itself is nowhere yet going to be generated by machine to start with. And the human has all its place for now, but also kind of a more critical roles. So getting this amplification from the machine, yes. Getting this replacement, absolutely not. Or at least we haven't seen that use case through our clients.
Yeah, and that's another fantastic point. And this kind of gets to sort of the distinction between the traditional and the sort of newer modes of building conversational AI. And that this is certainly a hesitation we've seen with plenty of organizations. Anyone who remembers Microsoft Tay might understand why organizations are hesitant to allow chatbots to get into that free-form natural language generation. It's something that large language models are wonderful at, and they can remember context across complex multi-turn conversations. But since they're trained on the full text of the internet, they're really just a mirror that we kind of hold up to the entirety of our society. And so they can generate things that are extremely helpful if the prompts are built correctly, but they can also generate things that are biased and harmful, which is why companies like OpenAI make you go through a review process. So on that point, Andy, I did want to ask you, I know that, so you're building a bot that is GPT-3 powered. How do you kind of handle, or are you allowing GPT-3 to kind of generate new novel language as it's speaking to users directly?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am. And my use case is much smaller than the the 5 biggest companies in the world. So we are live, but our bot has maybe around 20 to 50 conversations a week with visitors. So it's not at an enormous scale. But yes, we do actually let GPT-3 directly generate text and send that to users. Do I lose sleep at night over that? Yeah, a little bit. But I'll tell you some of the things that we put in place. So one is, and this is according to OpenAI's guidelines, we never simply stick a user in front of what is basically a raw prompt, right? We're always doing work to say at the head of our prompt, here's the kind of person you are, Lexi.ai. Here are the boundaries. Here's the kinds of things that you do say. Here's the kinds of things you don't say. And then, and some additional stuff as well. But within those guidelines, what we've found is Lexi is quite effective. Now, that's not to say that if you went out tomorrow and just tested the heck out of it and told it every terrible thing you could imagine, it wouldn't say something bad. But it's something that we are managing through, having a human in the loop to review every single transcript and making sure that we're properly QAing the work. So that's another piece, is making sure you do have a human in there. And then the other thing is, so OpenAI provides its own content filter, which actually you are required to use. So every prompt that goes out to a user, or sorry, every response that goes out to a user is actually run through that content filter. And if it generates content that is not kosher, it'll be simply ignored. So you do have that possibility, but you can also create your own models that look at the responses. And so this is what I mean by second order control structures. It's specifying a lower amount of information than entirely all of the rote information, and using just that little bit of a description. Lexi is a kind, legal intelligence. Using that to guide the output, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I have to write every single response to make sure it's correct. So that second order approach there, I think, has a lot of potential. And I do believe that until companies can figure out, or unless companies figure out a way to put large language models and the responses they generate directly in front of users, I think we'll never reach the potential that they have. So I do think it's essential for the industry.
Yeah, it's definitely, there's plenty left to figure out about how to properly harness these large language models, because I think you're right. It's different if you're early stage startup versus one of the world's largest brands in terms of the impact if it says something offensive. And so, yeah, there's still plenty to figure out here, both around how to generate the training data properly and how to, how we do the things that we're used to being able to do in the traditional models, like know when it's time to make an API call and, things like this. So there's still a lot left for the industry to figure out in this space. And I think that differentiation between first order and second order also really fascinating. Like if you want to look for interesting phrases to Google, I think prompt design or prompt engineering is something I've been paying a lot of attention to. There have been some papers recently that outside researchers were able to really improve the performance of even some of like OpenAI's own example prompts for doing things like translation, just by simplifying them. And so they simplified the prompt to be like a phrase in English, and they'd preface it with English : and then the prompt would just be like French : and just by making that change, they were able to improve the performance. There was one really interesting paper where they were able to perform reasoning performance by adding the phrase "think carefully" through each step, or something like that. And that, like,
think step by step. Yeah,
think step by step, dramatically improve the performance. So this kind of prompt design, prompt engineering, really fascinating, and I think really democratizing for this technology, because it's something that, I always told our clients, like, I'm an expert in how to help you make use of AI and machine learning, but I am not an AI and machine learning expert. That's not like, I don't produce this stuff myself. And this really it's handing the power to anyone to make advances like this, just by changing the way you ask the computer to to do a difficult thing for you. So that's really fascinating.
And I think that that's also one of the hesitation of the commercial market, or people, you know, using those technology for their clients. It's exactly what you said. It's the fact that we are still discovering, and I think we are barely scratching the surface about how to best exploit those technology. You know, we barely start to understand how to maximize, you know, more standard language model like intent-based models, and people are already still struggling to extract performance out of it. And there is this new thing that keep evolving, and I think until it stabilizes a little bit, until there is more research being done, until the rule of engagement are a little bit more established, people will just use that as some things to help, but still managed by people ultimately.
It's exciting to potentially look at prompt engineering and like the commercialization avenues for it, because it could change so much. Like you can use prompt engineering to train your models. See, so you don't, and there are like some of the early studies that I've read, because I just learned about this a couple months ago, guys, full disclosure, is the accuracy and precision and F1 scores are performing a lot better than humans actually training this, like specialized, you know, specialists who know the right syntax and how to build the right framework for conversational design. It's really quite exciting, but I still think we're about, you know, at least a year away from commercialization. I'm a bit more aggressive with, you know, what I think is going to, you know, these big companies are going to come out with their own version on their products of prompt engineering, but we're at least 1 to 3 years away. But once it does become commercialized, it's going to be exciting to see how quickly things change. And things are changing very quickly in conversational AI. What people would do 5 years ago is so much different now. We have BERT as the basis of, you know, so many chatbots out there. That wasn't really the case, you know, 5, 6 years ago. People were coming up with their kind of own models, and now we have a standardized model that a lot of companies are leveraging. So it's exciting times.
Yeah, and I mean, sorry, yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, I know we have a lot of conversational designers in the audience today, and I just wanted to make an appeal to you all to go experiment, go play. There is a huge opportunity in this space. Just like both the other speakers were just saying, it's kind of the Wild West right now. We are just scratching the surface, and the kinds of control structures that I've been talking about, these second order control structures, many of them are yet to be understood, yet to be defined. There is not a kind of standard conceptual regime to describe or understand language models yet. And so if you're interested in kind of pushing the envelope, it's a wonderful time to get into the field. And we need conversational designers who understand client requirements and what it's like to build these kinds of models or these kinds of bots on the ground to then take their experience and run it through scenarios where you would use a large language model instead. And that's going to help the industry improve. But, you know, again, the appeal is go experiment. If you haven't played around with GPT-3, A, it's going to blow your mind. B, it'll blow all of your friends' minds, and they'll think you're super cool. And it's also free. You can just go and sign up. I think you have to get a developer account or something, but it's like super simple. Basically, you just need a Google ID, and you can get on the playground. And I would just encourage you, go get on the playground, play around, and you will begin to see the possibilities there in front of us.
That, and I second that. Yeah, you're no longer having to get on the wait list, although I am now excitedly on the wait list for DALL-E 2, which is the text to image generation, which is its own fascinating subject, which maybe we can talk about one day. But yeah, definitely get into the playground. It's very simple to use, and it yeah, in terms of blowing people's minds, it's really amazing. Check out AI Dungeon if you haven't, which is kind of one of those text-based games that uses this technology. So it's using natural language generation, actually interacting with you, guiding you through one of these kind of text-based adventures. Really, really fascinating. You'll start to understand why that Google engineer was making the case for these things being sentient. Okay, I'll move on to our next question here. So we've got, how do you describe the purpose and benefit of large language models to clients who aren't familiar with AI or ML? And we'll have Benoit get started for this one.
I mean, the purpose of benefit, I think we touched a little bit on it earlier. It's really amplification of human task for the moment. It's going to evolve. It's going to become more as those technology mature. But yeah, I would say right now it's very much around amplifications and removing mundane tasks. So, in our use case at Qbox, for example, it's all about generations of training data from training data. So you build your intent, you might have your first 10 utterances, and I bet anyone can come with 10 examples of asking about the weather. But, things like GTP3 will start to say, should I take an umbrella today? And so on, or can I get my flip-flop, or do I need sun cream, or whatever? And that's for a human on its own in front of his computer can be very, very difficult. So right now I see it personally as an amplification of human performance. After in the future, I have to admit I'm still 50-50 about, is this intentless world will work or not work? Because it is a panacea. It is what we want. It is, we don't want to have to train those intent-based model. We don't want to have to, for conversational designer to build those flow and to test each flow and to make sure But the reality of it is everybody that have tried a different approach have not yet succeeded. And that's why it's really, really important for everybody to stay close to the research, because people are trying to crack it and they may or they may not. That I will not know, but we see people like Raza trying to, push all this intentless model and so on, which in theory, it's great. In practice, it's removing even more control out of the chatbot trainer or the model trainer, which is a big leap of faith for businesses. Very, very different than if I build a chatbot to talk about myself, and it doesn't really matter too much,
So much of human interaction is based on language. That's how we've kind of evolved when you look at us over the last millennia. So when you're trying to explain some of these large language models to, I would say, like stakeholders or businesses, is really understand when you're looking at a journey of one of your customers, your clients, whatever it might be in the industry. We work primarily with clients at Wisdom, large enterprise clients. And if you look at their journey, how many points of interaction do they normally have with some type of person or some kind of language, whether they're reading something, they're writing something, or they're talking to someone, and it's constant. And what these language models are really helping us do, and this is kind of how we approach it, is take on, maybe the lower complexity, lower effort human interactions, and let your, let your employees or your whoever they might be, your agents, your whatever, the people who work for your company, take on more complex, the complex conversations coming in. And even now, as we speak, there's so much talk about companies leveraging dynamic conversations. How can we use contextual information to actually get ahead of asking our visitors or our guests for certain information. And that normally is a sticking point, I find, with, senior executives and stakeholders who might be interested in leveraging, some type of large scale or, some some large scale language model and improving some type of customer experience, maybe some painful customer points, or, just overall trying to get customers their questions answered faster. It's really an exciting time, I think, with how things are changing so quickly. It used to be, okay, just automate the low complexity stuff and just get that done. Now it's more so, okay, how can we focus on the design? How can we focus on the experience to make sure we're using the right inputs that we can, we already know, especially in a connected world, when you think of like IoT, Internet of Things. What can we use about what can we use about the customer to help catapult their experience and make them keep coming back for more to our brand? So
yeah, that's an excellent point. And I'm sure, Andy, I bet you have some.
It's a great point. So little known story, when the Wright brothers invented the airplane, they, never before in human history had human bodies been able to fly through the sky in this kind of a free-form way. And once they finally got it, they were, of course, overjoyed. And so they wanted to share the news. So they went to the first newspaper, like the newspaper nearest them, and they said, okay, so we did it. We solved human flight. It's awesome, great. And the newspaper said, no, we don't believe you. And they said, no, it's fine. Just come out. We'll show you. We'll do a test. And they said, no, we're not even going to do that, because if you'd really solved the miracle of human flight, some other news organization would have covered it. And it went on like this for months and months and months. They could not get anyone even just to come out to their airfield to observe it. And so then they created, then they went on this huge campaign to demonstrate it and do huge flyovers over major cities and things like that. So the point of that is that when you invent a technology that is outside of people's story about what's possible, it's very difficult for them to see the value or to even believe that it exists. And I believe that large language models are approaching artificial general intelligence. And for many, many people, artificial general intelligence is something that seems so far in the future or outside the realm of possibilities that they're simply not going to accept it. So what does that mean in practice? I think what it means is you have to actually get this in the hands of users. You have to, if you're trying to communicate the value to somebody, actually get them to engage with it. Because if you don't, it just sounds like yet another iteration of kind of intent-based approaches, or what I would call first order approaches. So getting in the hands of users is extremely important. I'm not saying that we've reached AGI today, but I do think it's on the horizon. And as these LLMs become more and more intelligent, they are going to be able to do more and more tasks that are just seen to us humans as if it shouldn't really be able to do. If you haven't seen DALL-E 2's images that it generates, they're mind-blowing. Sometimes you look at those images and you think, this is so incredibly emotionally complex and rich. How could a computer have generated it? And yet it has. And I do think that, one of the things that we've learned in large language models is that scaling the size of them seems to increase their intelligence. And so what that means is we're going to start building bigger and bigger language models over time. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, had a tweet recently that said trillion is the new billion. So we're thinking that he's teasing that the next model of GPT-3, GPT-4, will have something like 1 trillion or more parameters. To give you context, GPT-3 has 175 billion. So over the next 5 years, say, we can imagine that the intelligence of these machines is actually going to increase more and more and more. And that's why I think it's important to position yourself now, if you're a conversational designer, to understand these technologies and be able to bring them into all the kinds of use cases that we've been talking about so far. I think that will only increase.
Yeah, definitely. And just to share really quick Voxel's perspective on this, I echo Benoit's sentiments that, you know, there are some organizations that are going to be too large to kind of put this in front of users directly. And so it's going to be seen more as an accelerant. And so we, in terms of like those second order design principles, we allow folks to kind of choose some adjectives to describe the tone, so that you're kind of setting guidelines for the tone of those messages that get generated. And then just using it as that tool of like trying to automate something that's a really repetitive process for conversation designers, right? Think of something novel a user might say, and that this is something that's really great. It helps us transition our products from like tools into teammates, right? Something that's like a partner in a creative endeavor, and can make you much, much faster. We're also looking into using GPT-3 to create what we call conversational prototypes. So go from prototype to something you can talk to really, really quickly as part of your design process, because we're not worried about putting it in front of the public. This is just right. Like, I want to go quickly from design to something that I can put in front of stakeholders that they can actually talk to and interact with as if it is a real thing. Cool. So let me go to our next question here. This one, again, kind of prognostication. Where do we see the conversational AI industry headed in the next 3 to 5 years? Asma, maybe we'll start with you on this.
So, you know, it's kind of interesting. I would say like 3 to 4 years ago, you would need to make a business case on why you need conversational AI in companies or in these large enterprises, like why it's helpful for you. And now, when we go into our clients or our prospects, we don't even need to make a business case anymore. This is within the last 3 to 4 years. You know, things are changing really quickly. And when you look at how quickly it's changed and what you might see for the future, I think it's not going to be a question on whether or not a company needs conversational AI. It's yes, we need it, but we need help to set it up, because I think what's happening right now is that there's so many, especially when you have companies that are cloud first, there's so many options available to them. And it really takes a specialized set of very niche skills. So not UX people specifically, but conversational UX, not implementation engineers, but, you know, people who have worked specifically with API frameworks that deal with voice or, you know, with language or with CI/CD pipelines to pull in the right data to inform contextual conversations. Building the right teams is incredibly difficult. Or when it is, you know, companies that do invest in it, they spend millions and millions of dollars trying to do it. It takes them years to do it. And by the time they're looking at even implementing something, they might be 2 to 3 years behind their competitors. So where I see the market kind of going with the world of conversational AI is that more and more companies are going to look to, you know, companies like Wisdom or companies like Voxels, who have these talent pools of people who are trained with language, who have an underlying understanding, a very good understanding of what natural language is, how it deals with AI, you know, what feedback mechanisms there are for training, and the importance of ongoing optimization. They're going to look more and more potentially to outsource. Companies are going, so that's one. 2, companies who are not moving to cloud will be forced to move into cloud if they want to adopt any kind of AI solutions, any kind of conversational AI solutions. And then I think companies are going to move into, how can we build delightful experiences, you know, not just, hey, save me some money, or, you know, show some trends that are happening, but how can we really use this data to inform key decisions, and how can we delight our customers at every point of their journey? And the way that conversational AI is going to, I think, change this in the upcoming years is, you know, things like prompt engineering, being able to get things out very quickly, because you can train an AI model to train another AI model, and sometimes the accuracy is better than humans. You're still going to have humans in the loop. I don't think that's going away anytime in the next couple of years, maybe ever in the next decade. I would go as far as saying that. But those are just a couple of points, I think, with where the conversational AI industry is moving. And then, of course, you know, there's so many different platforms available now with that leverage either their own solutions, or they, take a large language model, kind of tweak it, and then make it specialize into, something like fintech, for example, or retail, or operations, something like that. We're seeing a lot of that happen as well, and I think there's going to be more niche players in that as well. So that's kind of where I see this conversational AI industry going.
Excellent. Benoit?
Yeah, I mean, I think 3 to 5 years. Unfortunately, I have been in this space for a long time, and unfortunately, because I'm not young anymore. And I remember, like, a few years ago thinking, "Why, in 2 years' time it will be very, very, very different. The technology will be different, and things move always a lot less fast than you think." I think that's the reality. If you look at the technology, in terms of technology, if you look at the technology that were in play 5 years ago and the technology we have in play right now, it has been really an improvement on what we had, but it hasn't been a shift away from what we had. So I think, are we going to move to large model? That will be the big evolution that may happen. Will it happen? We debated that a little bit earlier, but you always have to remember that technology is not moving that fast. What's going to be very interesting is the structure of the company that deal with those products. Ashma talks about outsourcing. There will be a level of outsourcing. I know our company as well do a lot of helping company to set up their own teams. I can see through our clients, there are large telco, large banks, and people like that, FMGC, I'm not entirely sure how you say it, but anyway, they are become more and more professionals. I mean, I remember 5 years ago, the chatbot was owned by IT. Then after it moved to marketing, because surely that was going to be marketing because it was owned by the brand. And now it's become an entity on its own. I mean, I have clients that have 300 people in their chatbot team across their, 20 markets they have in the world. That start to be a proper organizations there. So I think we're going to see a lot of movement, a lot of those roles we talk about that we know about, conversational designer, but also NLP trainers and all those type of guys becoming part of a team in itself, having their own responsibility. I was talking to a client earlier who is head of conversational AI for a bank, and he said, I don't have to justify budget anymore because last year we automated 11 million conversations. And that's the reality of it. That's where we are, and as much as 3 years ago he had to fight a little bit to justify what he was doing, it doesn't anymore, or at least not at the same levels. And finally, I think the move we are going to see definitely over the next 5 years is all those conversational AI projects moving to voice. This is something we already see. There is a huge demand. People are still playing with it. I think we're in the playing phase. I think CCI from Google is trying to release some really cool stuff. Microsoft is trying to do everything that is around custom voice, neural voice. Do you want to have an actor that represents your brand and using synthetic voice for that, but also customizing speech to text models the same way that you're customizing, intent-based models. In order to really concentrate this speech-to-text model toward the subject that is represented within your business. So I think that the 3 moves we are going to see, technology either will have a big evolution with large models, or we'll have a continuous improvement of what we have. Teams are going to professionalize themselves, and we are going to change medium, or the medium is going to convert as well a lot more to voice.
Excellent. And Andy, how about yourself? Where are we headed over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I thought Asma and Benoit had excellent answers. I would agree with pretty much everything they said. You know, one common thread there is the proliferation of conversational interfaces. More and more, we will see, yes, voice, but also things like, you know, perhaps the evolution of even Google.com. What if Google.com searches were to use a conversational interface? Is that possible? Well, they've built a model that's pretty amazing. Maybe it is. So I think that over the next 5 years, we'll see interesting use cases put forward. But what I just want to emphasize again, because I know that this can sound a little bit lofty and like, oh, all this AI ML stuff and what the hell's going on with all of that, especially if you don't have a training in AI ML. I'll just let you know a secret. I don't either. I don't have a training in AI or ML. What the industry really needs right now is tinkerers. And it's a kind of a funny term, but when you're playing with GPT-3, that is to say, when you're designing a conversational experience using large language models, or even when you're designing like an ancillary product that would help you with your existing conversational models that are on a first order approach, there is a huge opportunity for playing around and experimentation, and so many different tricks are still unknown. Just like you said, Matt, there's the oh, if we think step by step, now all of a sudden we do enormously better on math tasks. And there's like a bunch of those things, but there's many that remain to be discovered. And so if you're feeling a little intimidated, please don't. Please experiment, go play around. And the industry needs people who understand the on the ground realities of building these flows to tinker, and you will actually be able to outperform in many cases like an AI ML engineer, because AI ML engineers, they're building kind of what's under the hood. They're not so focused on the actual output, and so there's a huge opportunity. Please go experiment.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. And I, again, want to echo that. It's very simple to do. And to your earlier point, Andy, about whether or not these models are approaching artificial general intelligence, I've seen similar, that sentiment echoed amongst researchers in this field, that, you know, they're starting to realize that the entirety of human language is really both the way we communicate and the way that we think about things, right? Most folks are thinking in language rather than pure abstract concepts, right? And so they are realizing that we've built this model of the way that we conceive of the world. If you're familiar with like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, like the bounds of your language form the bounds of what you can think and reason about. And so we've encoded not only the ability to understand language and to generate new language, but the ability to give the appearance of reasoning through a problem, if not whether or not it's semantically actually reasoning through this problem or not. So with our last minute question, we did have a question for Andy, if you wouldn't mind jumping in. Meredith read your post, and she was wondering how you see designer output being different between second order and first order. Do you think it's less flowcharts and instead more some other form of artifact that represents goal-based design or tone guidance, and what you imagine that looking like, perhaps?
Yeah, well, very quickly, I know we're getting close to time here. So I would say the landscape of these second order control structures remains to be fully seen or fully discovered. So the shorter answer is we don't know yet, but I can talk about just a few structures very quickly. So one is identity. So, you know, we've talked so much about being a representation of a brand's voice. You can encode that kind of representation in a statement about what the identity of a bot, shall we say, in like a paragraph or less, and put that at the top of a prompt. You can also encode state-based, like dialogue states. So you can say things like, okay, if we've had this kind of a, or if we've had a question, say, and it appears that somebody is asking us for a follow-up to that question, even if I don't know exactly what the question was about or what the follow-up answer should be, I can nevertheless throw the conversation back to the LLM to give a response. So you can build these, again, like second or structures that don't require the rote kind of flow chart type of methodology. But a key point on this whole second order, first order thing is just that really it is an evolution of the same concepts. It's not that intent-based design goes away, it's just that it gets automated dynamically through what a machine learning model is doing. So all of those structures really remain. It's just a matter of figuring out what are the abstractions that we can figure out that will control those dynamically, and will that then hopefully save us time, save our company money, and generate great experiences.
Excellent. And we will leave it there. Thank you again so much, Benoit, Asma, Andy, to everyone who joined, all of our organizers, really appreciate it. And we will see y'all again next month. Bye.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers,
Take care.
adios.
Bye.